Mark Pope just landed the first commitment of his Kentucky career, and folks, it's a big one.
You are Locked On Kentucky, your daily podcast on the Kentucky Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, what's going on, Big Blue Nation? Welcome on into Locked On Kentucky, your daily Kentucky Wildcats podcast. I'm your host, Lance Dawe, and on today's episode of Locked On Kentucky, we are going to be discussing Malachi Moreno, a four-star center, number one center in the 2025 class, committing to Mark Pope and the Kentucky Wildcats. Huge get, especially considering it's Pope's first commitment of his early Kentucky career. Going to talk about Marino as a prospect. What do we know? How do we feel about it? I've been raving about this kid for months. Going to talk about what this means for the 2025 class. And speaking of that 25 class, Marino himself had some things to say about another prospect, in-state prospect, Jasper Johnson. Thank you so much for making Locked On Kentucky your first listen every single day. I want to remind everyone out there that we are free and available on all platforms. If you're watching on YouTube, I would greatly appreciate it if you subscribe to the show. And if you are listening on podcast, I would also appreciate it if you subscribed there as well. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more, and as we wade deeper into the summer here, no playoffs, not a ton of sports going on. Sports kind of stopped sporting like we want them to, but FanDuel this summer is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right, there's something for everyone every day all summer long, so visit FanDuel.com to get started. All right, let's go ahead and get into it. Malachi Moreno, the number one overall center in the 2025 class, has committed to the Kentucky Wildcats. Happened earlier this morning at 11:30 Eastern, 10:30 Central. This was big. A 7-footer from Great Crossing here in the state. Mark Pope able to pick him up, and we've talked about this kid and how Mark Pope is for a couple of months now. This looked like a match made in heaven from a mile away. Marino has talked about a place that he wants to go that kind of helps him expand his faith, kind of helps him dive into a family community. He wants to be surrounded by people who are going to lift him up and care about him. He wants to be involved in that. He wants to go to a place where he is asked to contribute to the team, and all he wants to do is go out there and win through that contribution. I love this prospect from a character perspective, from how he matches with our coaching staff, from how he matches on the court. Everything about this is a green light across the board. And it does not hurt that he is also one of the best prospects in next year's class. According to On3, Malachi Moreno is a top 25 prospect. According to the industry ranking, if you look at On3's raw prospect rating, he is the number 21 overall player, number 2 center, and number 1 player in the state of Kentucky. But if you average it out, he is the number 1 player in this center class. 7 foot, 210, 215 pounds, depending on where you look. A bit of a wiry frame, but that does not take away from his skill set. At least it does not currently. We've discussed this a ton. What do we know about Marino? He is a jack of all trades, does a little bit of everything at a pretty high level. If you look at scouting reports and if you listen to this show, if you go and watch his YouTube highlights, it's very clear there's a lot that he has that translates well to the collegiate game. It's just a question of whether or not he can kind of stack some things onto the skill set that he has already acquired and maybe add some more versatility to his offensive game. Really, really solid inside the paint on both ends of the floor, defending the rim. Not necessarily a massive shot blocker, but definitely affects rim shots, and that's something we've talked about for literally 3 years on this show, about the importance of, well, it doesn't really matter how many shots you block if you're not affecting every shot at the rim in some way or another, whether you get your hand on it or not. It doesn't really matter. At the end of the day, you still could have a really poor 2-point defense. Marino has great timing and anticipation on both the defensive and the offensive end of the floor. He's really, really good around the rim, vacuuming up rebounds, kind of like Oscar Tshiebwe did. This is not an Oscar Tshiebwe comparison. I'm just saying there are some similar things in the way that they rebound the basketball when it comes to the timing, when it comes to the ability to kind of get putbacks and finish a lot of different possessions with a second chance point or two. I love the way that this kid operates around the basket, not just grabbing rebounds and defending the rim, but also the post moves. He reminds me of a player, we can talk about him in a second. We talked about it on yesterday's show. I'll be a little bit more brief today. But he reminds me of a player that's currently in the SEC, that's a former that was an All-American last season. Marino has so much to add to a team like Kentucky already offensively when it comes to scoring inside the paint. Also got a little bit of stuff going on in the mid-range as well. You'd expect that from somebody that's 7 foot, 210, and can kind of step out and handle the ball as well as he can. You would expect that shot to kind of come with that. Lots of things that he does very well. Not necessarily at an elite level, but he is so good in so many different areas. You really understand why he averages out, according to the industry ranking, as the best center in this class. Whenever he was asked about whenever he was asked from KSR about why he ended up choosing to commit to Kentucky over, again, Arkansas, Indiana, Iowa, Louisville, North Carolina, Notre Dame, and Ohio State, he said, I'm going to the Big Blue, and I'm going there because I felt like it was the right fit for me. He was also asked why he went ahead and committed to Kentucky, because he's got a ton of time. He could have taken this several more months before he actually had to make a decision, and he said that he wanted to get involved with Mark Pope and Lexington early before he went to go play high school ball for his final senior season. He said, just so I can be committed to my dream school, I want BBN to know I'm here for business and they have the whole season to watch me work, see my improvement, and see that he's really about getting this next banner. I was asked about what made Kentucky his dream school, obviously because he lives so close. He said, being 20 minutes down the road, I watched them every single time they played. Just seeing the success they were able to have just showed me how much I wanted to play there. It was always my dream. I'm now able to turn that dream into a reality. Love, love, love this pickup for Kentucky basketball. Super excited to have Marino on the team. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Going to continue to dive into more of what this prospect is about in just a second. Before we do that, though, I do want to tell you guys about our friends over at FanDuel. I love sports, and I love them so much. I never want them to stop, but as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer games, and the sports aren't quite sporting like I want them to, but FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open up the app and dream up bets anytime that I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right, there's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. That is FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. All right, continuing along here on the Friday edition of Locked On Kentucky. Lance Dawe hanging out here with you again. I really appreciate you guys checking out the show today. If you have not subscribed to the YouTube channel or the podcast feed, I would greatly appreciate it if you did so. Talking about Malachai Marino committing to the Kentucky Wildcats, a big-time get for Mark Pope and the Cats, the #1 overall center in the 2025 class. Broke down how solid he is in just a variety of areas on the basketball court as well as off. It's a match made in heaven for Mark Pope, and we've touched on this a few times before on the show. But now that he's committed, it's official, we can really kind of dive into this. So we talked about how good he is rebounding, defending, getting putbacks, post moves, everything that you want a big man to do. He's got the height as well. It's a solid pickup. But I think that there's more here than meets the eye, because I could continue to compare Marino to a center that is currently in the SEC and is an All-American, and that is Johni Broome. Over the course of 4 years in college, Johni Broome has continued to develop and strengthen his all-around abilities, and he's added a couple of different things to his game as well. During his 2 seasons at Morehead State, he was a very, very solid rebounder on both ends of the floor, one of the best in the nation. Offensive rebounding, I believe, in his second season, and his first season was a really good defensive rebounder. He did not take threes over the course of his first couple of seasons. He took 5 threes in his second season. His sophomore season with the Eagles went 0 of 5 from beyond the arc. However, when he transferred to Auburn, Bruce Pearl and company started to encourage him to do some different things with his game. His assist rate went up. His passing looked crisp. His rebounding got stronger. His scoring was really impressive. He was a dominant player in terms of possessions used and in terms of touches for the Tigers this past season. And on top of this, they started telling him to shoot threes. And this really didn't start happening until closer towards the end of the year. And his overall percentage wasn't great. He shot 29%, but during conference play, as things wound down over the course of the season, he was shooting over 40% from beyond the arc. So heading into his senior season, his 4th year, he's heading into his 5th year now, Auburn started to encourage him to work on that outside shot. I actually had the opportunity to interview him last offseason, and we had a conversation about how important his three-point shot was going to be to his arsenal this season, and he said that it was something that he worked on every single day. It was something that he was trying to make he was trying to put a point of emphasis on during his offseason, to work on it, to improve it, and to make it part of his game, because he was so good at all of these other things in order to be enticing to NBA scouts and in order to be a more versatile piece for his team. He wanted to add that to his repertoire. Look at Malachai Marino, already coming out of high school, so good in a variety of areas. I think he's like Broom. He's got the post moves, he's got the rebounding, he's got the defensive statistics as well. If you give him time, and whenever I say time, I don't mean 9 months. I don't mean a year. I mean 2.5 to 3 seasons to really work his way through this program. Junior or senior season, All-American type player who I think could potentially develop a little bit more of an outside range, especially if he's going to stay at the weight that he currently is, 210 pounds. You're almost going to want him to be a more versatile piece that steps out beyond the three-point line. And honestly, it's something that Mark Pope may demand, because he's going to put his bigs beyond that three-point line, I should say. The bigs are going to be passing from beyond that point. The bigs are going to be dribbling beyond that point. They're going to be asked to do a ton of different things you don't traditionally see out of your 5-man. Marino has the ability. I see the potential. It's just whether or not Kentucky can truly execute and kind of add that onto his game. I believe that given time, he will end up being one of the best centers in the SEC. He's going to be one of the best players in the country. Big get. To start the 2025 class, this is huge. Huge for Kentucky. For it not to be a recruit that the national landscape looks at and goes, it's not that impressive. We've seen better at Kentucky. No, this is the best player at his position in next year's class. You cannot critique this negatively and rationally at the same time. There is nothing wrong with this. This is a great start. But Kentucky needs more, and we talked about that on yesterday's show. They need to be able to get a couple of more players that are high profile, that they can get to stay in the program, at least 2 of them to stay in the program. One of them could be a one and done, perfectly fine, but they need at least 2 that will be able to come back to college for a sophomore season and develop. We talked about how big UConn is and how important that's been for them over their national title runs over the past 2 seasons. Kentucky needs to start to emulate some of that, I think, especially with the personnel that they're going to be bringing in and out. They're going to be bringing in these high-profile, offensively strong types of wings, positionless players. You're going to need to get some of them to stay. You're going to need to get some of them to develop so that you can get more physical, more experienced, more defensively sound players as you develop through college. Kentucky is in a good position if they continue to get kids like this. There's another kid that Kentucky has been working with for a very long time. North Carolina and Alabama pushing for this kid as well. He may not end up at Kentucky, but the Wildcats are doing everything they can to get him, and Malachi Moreno knows that. I want to kind of dive into our current thoughts on Jasper Johnson and his relationship with the Kentucky Wildcats in just a second. Before I do that, though, I want to tell you guys about our friends over at Game Time. Game Time is the place to go if you want to get your MLB tickets. In fact, if you want to get any tickets for any kind of sporting event, you can head over to Game Time. I have utilized them every single time. I've gone to get tickets for Braves games this season. I utilized them throughout college football season last year. It is the place to go. Killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and then their lowest price guarantee. They take the guesswork out of buying your MLB tickets. I actually know a friend that reached out just this afternoon. They're going to a game up north, an MLB game up north, and they are using Game Time as well. It's the place to go. It's the place to be. The only place you need to get your tickets. Sports, concerts, comedy, theater, any sort of event, Game Time's going to have a ticket for it. You need to take the guesswork out of buying your tickets over at Game Time. All you have to do is download the Game Time app, create an account, and then you can use code LOCKEDONCollege to get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right, wrapping up the Friday edition of Locked On Kentucky. Lance Dawe hanging out here with you. Again, if you have any questions for the show, I would greatly appreciate it if you drop those in the YouTube comments below, or at Locked On UK on the socials is where you can find me as well. Super excited about this pickup in Malachai Marino, but there's a prospect the Wildcats are in hot pursuit of that Malachai Marino wants him to join Mark Pope and the Cats as well next season. Pope getting this 4-star. He's going to need to get a 5-star at some point, I think, in next year's class. And Jasper Johnson may very well be that guy. Marino was asked about what his thoughts are on maybe getting some other players to come along with him, to join him in this 2025 class. What could other players do to come to kind of build around Marino? And Marino's got a few names in mind, apparently, according to KSR. He said, ironically, I have a list of people that I want to text after this. One of them being Jasper Johnson. Another one also being Braylon Mullins, I might add, one of the best shooters in next year's class. Going to keep an eye on him. But Johnson, kid from Lexington, if he can get him here, getting these two guys in next year's class is already awesome. If you keep everybody on this year's current roster that can go play for UK next season, Dawe is going to be a leader. Garrison's going to step up. Perry, Noah, Chandler, they're all going to be key pieces, I think. Then you have Johnson, and then you have Marino. That's a core you can build upon. According to Marino, his pitch to a player like Johnson is that you need to come home, you need to play for UK, you need to stay in state, and you need to come play for us. He said, I talk to him every now and then. I'm just constantly telling him there's no place like home. BBN loves us, and we can say we got to wear Kentucky across our chest. It's a dream we've both had since we were little kids. If you can get a player like Johnson to stay in Kentucky, it's big for Pope, right? It's big for this class, but it's even more important for the future of Kentucky basketball recruiting. I think a lot of people have immediate doubts when it comes to Mark Pope. There's no questions about the X's and O's. It's the question of whether or not you can recruit at the level that Kentucky's going to demand that you recruit at. And Mark Pope's not shying away from anything. If you can get somebody like this, it shows you can stay in state, and you can pick up guys, and you can pick up high-end talent still. You can get them to come to your program, because at the end of the day, like Pope has even said, it's bigger than you as an individual. It's bigger than him. It's the program. It's the brand. It's the name. It's Kentucky basketball. Marino said, we're from Kentucky. We have the opportunity to put it on. We can wear Kentucky across our chests, and people will be happy about it. We're from here. You know what I mean? This is home. I'm a highly ranked recruit with a lot of connections. There is no better place, in my opinion. That's what Marino had to say about Kentucky, about Jasper coming potentially. 5-star combo guard in next year's class. Jasper Johnson, number 11 player nationally. Rated as a 4-star according to On3, but every other place has him rated as a 5-star prospect. Really talented scorer. Can do everything. Outside shooting. Can get to the basket. Very creative in the mid-range as well. Can also, I think, turn it up on the defensive end if given time. His father, by the way, fun fact here, former All-SEC defensive end at Kentucky and former NFL player. I think given the time with his length, at 6'4", 170 pounds, he can become a versatile player, not just a scorer potentially for Kentucky. Offensively, he's got it. Defensively, I think he can step it up. 6'4", I think he can develop into that. One of the best players that Kentucky has seen as a prospect over this last decade or so. To be able to keep this guy in state would be Huge for the Wildcats. Hopefully Marino is able to persuade Johnson to stay. All right, that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Kentucky. You can follow the show on Twitter at Locked On UK. You can follow me on Twitter at @LanceDawe_, and you can follow the show over on Instagram. That is at Kentucky Podcast. Any questions, comments, concerns, leave those in the YouTube comments below. Hit me on the socials. I will see you all tomorrow for another episode of Locked On Kentucky. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and God bless.